Picture this. You are a 12-year-old boy named Marcus, standing in a marble hall beneath the Palatine Hill in the year 67 AD. The gold chains around your ankles clink as you shiver, not from cold, but from terror. Emperor Nero himself examines you like a piece of livestock, his fingers tracing scars on your back while discussing your purchase price with the slave dealer. Tonight, you'll discover what it means to be a spintria, a child whose body becomes currency in the most depraved sexual economy the world has ever known. This moment of humiliation is just the beginning of a nightmare that will consume what's left of your childhood. Your trainer, a castrated Greek named Apollodorus, explains the rules with clinical detachment. You'll service anyone who pays your fee, senators, merchants, even other slaves if their masters provide the coin. Resistance means death. Hesitation means torture. Pleasure, he whispers with a cruel smile, is forbidden. You exist solely to provide satisfaction while experiencing none yourself. The bronze token they'll hang around your neck bears an image of the sexual act you'll be forced to perform. There's no escape, no hope, no future beyond this marble prison where childhood goes to die. What Marcus didn't realize was how the other children moved, mechanically, like broken puppets going through motions their souls had long since abandoned. But here's the thing that'll chill your blood. Marcus wasn't unique. In Rome's Golden Age, when poets wrote about glory and architects built monuments to eternity, thousands of children like him were systematically destroyed by sexual practices so organized, so calculated, that they operated like factories of human suffering. This wasn't random cruelty. This was institutionalized abuse on an industrial scale, sanctioned by law and celebrated by the very people we're taught to admire as the founders of Western civilization. How did the empire that gave us law, engineering, and philosophy also create the most sophisticated systems of sexual exploitation in human history? Here's the full story of how Rome transformed human bodies into commodities and turned pleasure into an industry built on the bones of children. These are the stories history tried to bury. If you want more of them unearthed, hit like and subscribe. And please comment to tell me where you're watching from. The numbers alone will shatter your worldview. By the 1st century AD, Rome operated over 500 officially licensed brothels, employing an estimated 30,000 prostitutes. But these figures tell only the surface of a horror so calculated, so integrated into Roman society, that it functioned like a machine designed to consume innocence and produce compliance. Conservative estimates suggest that at any given time, 15,000 children under 14 were trapped in Rome's sex trade, their bodies bought and sold with the same casual efficiency used for grain or olive oil. But wait, it gets worse. Roman law didn't just permit the sexual exploitation of children. It encouraged it through legal frameworks that treated young bodies as property. The patria potestas gave fathers absolute ownership over their children, including the right to sell them into slavery or rent them out for profit. Abandoned infants, a common practice in Roman society, were collected by professional traders who raised them specifically for the sex industry. These children had no legal identity, no citizenship, no protection under law. They existed in a legal void where anything could be done to them without consequence. The spintria system represented Rome's most diabolic innovation in sexual commerce. These weren't ordinary prostitutes. They were children specifically trained from infancy to provide specialized services that adult prostitutes couldn't or wouldn't perform. The word itself comes from the Greek sphincter, revealing the primary function these children served in Roman society. Think about that for a second. An entire economy built around the systematic abuse of children, complete with training schools, specialized markets, and bronze tokens that advertised specific services. The logistics alone reveal the industrial scale of this nightmare. The locked chamber in the training house held secrets that would explain why even hardened slave dealers refused to enter certain rooms after dark. The psychological conditioning proved even more devastating than physical abuse. Children were systematically taught that their only value lay in providing pleasure to others. They learned to suppress natural reactions of fear, pain, and revulsion, while displaying appropriate enthusiasm for whatever was demanded. Those who failed to convincingly perform happiness during their abuse faced punishments that made death seem like mercy. The Spintria operated from specialized brothels designed specifically for child prostitution. These establishments, concentrated in Rome's Suburra district, featured age-segregated rooms decorated with explicit artwork that advertised available services. Customers could browse children like merchandise, examining their bodies, and negotiating prices based on age, appearance, and specialized training. The architecture itself was designed to maximize psychological trauma. Narrow corridors prevented escape while amplifying the sounds of other children's suffering. Mirrors lined the walls, forcing victims to watch their own abuse while being unable to look away. The floors were deliberately kept cold to ensure constant discomfort that reminded the children of their powerlessness. But here's what's truly disturbing. The brothels employed specialized staff whose only job was maintaining the children's psychological compliance. These overseers, called magistri libidinis, were experts in breaking human will through calculated combinations of reward and punishment. They knew exactly how much kindness to show before withdrawing it, creating desperate dependency that made resistance psychologically impossible. The daily routine followed patterns designed by experts in human suffering. Children were awakened before dawn for inspections that evaluated their physical condition and mental state. Those showing signs of resistance received immediate correction through methods that left no visible marks, but created lasting psychological damage. The goal wasn't just compliance. It was the complete erasure of individual will. Think about the sophistication required to maintain this system. The Romans didn't stumble into this horror. They engineered it with the same precision they used to build aqueducts and roads. For a brief moment, Marcus thought rescue had arrived, when Senator Gaius Cornelius showed him unexpected kindness during a visit. Only later would he understand this too was part of the machine. The bronze tokens that gave Spintria their name served as both currency and advertisement. These small coins depicted specific sexual acts with artistic precision, allowing customers to communicate their desires without verbal negotiation. Archaeological evidence suggests that millions of these tokens circulated throughout the empire, indicating the massive scale of child commerce in Roman society. What makes these tokens even more chilling is their artistic quality. Rome's finest craftsmen created these advertisements for child abuse with the same skill they brought to imperial coins and religious artifacts. The empire's greatest artists were literally designing advertisements for the abuse of children, treating it as just another commercial commission. Recent archaeological discoveries at Pompeii revealed entire workshops dedicated to producing these tokens, complete with detailed molds and quality control standards. The ash that preserved the city also preserved evidence of an industry that mass-produced advertisements for child abuse with industrial efficiency. The economic impact extended far beyond the immediate trade. Wealthy Romans invested in Spintria as they would in any other profitable commodity. Children were bought, trained, and sold with detailed accounting that tracked their market value, service fees, and depreciation over time. Estate inventories from Pompeii and Herculaneum list child slaves alongside other valuable property, complete with age, appearance ratings, and specialized skills. But the investment strategies went deeper than simple ownership. Roman financiers developed complex instruments for profiting from child exploitation without direct involvement. They created funds that pooled investments from multiple wealthy Romans, spreading risk while generating steady returns from systematic abuse. This nightmare was just beginning. The Roman wedding industry created its own horrific practices that transformed what should have been joyous occasions into public displays of sexual domination and community-sanctioned violence. Roman marriage ceremonies weren't private family celebrations. They were social events where the bride's sexual subjugation was celebrated as entertainment for the entire community. Professional marriage brokers, known as proxenete matrimonii, specialized in evaluating and preparing young girls for the marriage market. These experts would assess a girl's commercial value, recommend physical modifications to increase her appeal, and provide training in the sexual techniques that would satisfy her future husband. The preparation process often began when girls reached age 8, giving brokers years to maximize their market value. The tradition of matrimonial inspection began weeks before the actual ceremony. Prospective brides, some as young as 12, were subjected to invasive physical examinations by their future husband's female relatives. These inspections weren't medical procedures, but detailed evaluations of the girl's sexual potential and breeding capacity. Every aspect of her anatomy was scrutinized, measured, and documented with the clinical detachment used for evaluating livestock. Can you imagine being 12 and facing this humiliation? The examination results were recorded in detailed reports that became part of the marriage contract, specifying the bride's physical capabilities and establishing performance expectations for the wedding night and beyond. The wedding night itself became a community spectacle where proof of consummation was demanded as public entertainment. Wedding guests wouldn't depart until they heard evidence that the marriage had been completed. The bride's screams were considered confirmation of successful penetration, while silence suggested potential fraud or inadequacy that could invalidate the union. Roman wedding contracts often included specific clauses detailing sexual obligations and penalties for non-compliance. These legal documents treated the bride's body as territory to be conquered and occupied, with detailed provisions for what constituted adequate performance of marital duties. Failure to satisfy contractual sexual requirements could result in divorce, financial penalties, or even criminal charges. The practice of wedding night witnesses took community involvement to disturbing extremes. Selected guests would position themselves outside the bridal chamber, sometimes for hours, to verify that consummation occurred. These witnesses would later provide testimony in legal proceedings if the validity of the marriage was ever questioned, turning intimate moments into legal evidence. And here's where it gets truly sick. Roman law required brides to demonstrate their submission through specific acts during the wedding ceremony itself. The ritual of hair cutting symbolized the transfer of the woman's identity from her father to her husband, while the ceremonial tearing of clothing represented the violent conquest that awaited her in the marriage bed. The religious dimension of Roman sexuality added layers of horror that transformed abuse into sacred duty. Temple prostitution wasn't just commerce. It was divinely mandated exploitation that used religious authority to justify the systematic abuse of children and adults alike. The gods themselves became perpetrators in a system that sanctified sexual violence through spiritual manipulation. The cult of Cybele required young boys to castrate themselves in religious ecstasy before serving as temple prostitutes for the rest of their lives. These children, some as young as 10, would mutilate their own bodies during frenzied religious ceremonies, believing they were offering themselves to the goddess. The priests who encouraged this self-destruction then sold these castrated boys to wealthy patrons, seeking exotic, intimate experiences. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. The castration ceremonies were public festivals that drew crowds of spectators who cheered and threw coins as children destroyed their own bodies. The ritual included specific techniques designed to maximize the victim's survival while ensuring permanent mutilation. Temple physicians developed specialized procedures that kept most boys alive through the ordeal, preserving their value as future assets. The castrated boys, called Galli, underwent years of additional modification to make them more appealing to customers. Their voices were trained to maintain childlike qualities. Their bodies were subjected to hormonal treatments using various herbs and animal extracts. And their behavior was carefully conditioned to display appropriate feminine characteristics while retaining masculine features that certain customers preferred. The Festival of Floralia transformed abuse into public entertainment that the entire city was expected to enjoy. During this annual celebration, prostitutes were forced to perform naked in the streets, while crowds threw coins and made demands for specific acts. Children caught up in these festivities had no protection from adult appetites, and many disappeared permanently into the networks of exploitation that fed Rome's sexual economy. The festival included specialized events designed specifically around child participants. Young performers, both boys and girls, were required to demonstrate their skills in public competitions that served as advertisements for their availability. The winners received prizes and recognition, while all participants were evaluated by potential customers who could negotiate for private services during the celebration. What's truly sick is how these religious festivals created legal immunity for sexual crimes. Any act committed during religious observance was considered sacred and therefore beyond civil law. This meant that children could be abused, mutilated, or killed during festivals without legal consequences for the perpetrators. Religious brothels operated with government approval and divine blessing, creating legal sanctuaries where any intimate practice could be justified as spiritual worship. The priests who managed these establishments developed elaborate theologies that portrayed sexual violence as necessary offerings to the gods, convincing victims that their suffering was divinely ordained. The temple records that survived reveal the systematic nature of religious sexual exploitation. Detailed ledgers tracked which gods required which types of victims, the specific rituals that must be performed, and the fees charged for various services. These documents treated child sacrifice and abuse as routine administrative matters, requiring careful documentation and quality control. But what they discovered next defied belief. The Roman foster system, designed supposedly to care for abandoned children, actually functioned as a sophisticated pipeline feeding Rome's sex industry. The practice of child exposure, abandoning unwanted infants in public places, provided a steady supply of victims for exploitation while allowing parents to maintain plausible deniability about their children's fate. Professional child collectors operated with legal immunity, gathering exposed infants, ostensibly for charitable adoption, but actually for sale to training houses that prepared them for servitude. The Roman government not only permitted this system, but regulated it like any other commercial enterprise, taxing the sale of children and licensing the establishments that exploited them. The foster families who officially adopted abandoned children often treated them as investments rather than family members. These children, called alumni, were raised specifically to generate income through intimate services, with their foster parents collecting fees from customers while providing minimal care or protection. The alumni had no legal recourse against their treatment and no hope of escape from their designated role. Legal documents from Pompeii reveal the sophistication of this system, with detailed contracts specifying the terms under which children would be trained, the services they would provide, and the division of profits between their foster parents and customers. These agreements treated childhood exploitation as a standard business arrangement, worthy of legal protection and enforcement. The Roman adoption process included provisions for sexual access that would horrify modern audiences. Wealthy Romans who adopted children often included clauses in adoption documents that explicitly granted them intimate privileges with their adopted offspring. The legal system treated these arrangements as private family matters beyond governmental oversight or regulation. Now listen to this twisted detail. Roman law actually protected customers who damaged child prostitutes, treating such incidents as property disputes rather than crimes against persons. If a client injured a child during intimate activity, the legal remedy was financial compensation to the owner, not punishment for harming the victim. The guild system that organized Roman trades and professions included specialized groups for those involved in child exploitation. These guilds provided legal representation, established pricing standards, and lobbied for favorable legislation. They operated with the same legitimacy as guilds for bakers, metalworkers, or other recognized professions. The tax records that survive from Roman provincial cities show that income from child prostitution was officially recognized and regularly assessed for government revenue. This taxation legitimized the industry, while providing economic incentives for local authorities to protect and expand the networks that exploited children. The judicial system created special courts to handle disputes related to sexual commerce, complete with judges who specialized in cases involving child prostitution. These courts developed elaborate jurisprudence around the ownership, training, and use of children for sexual purposes, treating human trafficking as a complex legal specialty worthy of expert attention. Can you imagine a civilization so corrupt that it created legal experts in child exploitation? The surviving court records document thousands of cases involving disputes over child ownership, service quality, and compensation for damaged goods. These documents reveal a society that had completely normalized the commodification of childhood innocence. The truth was more horrifying than anyone had imagined. Roman sexual practices weren't the products of individual depravity, but systematic social arrangements supported by law, religion, economics, and cultural tradition. The empire that conquered the Mediterranean had also conquered human decency, creating institutions that transformed natural desires into industrial-scale exploitation. In just 5 years, the shepherd boy who had once played in Gallic meadows was gone forever. In his place existed something hollow, something that breathed but no longer lived. Marcus was not alone. Across the Roman Empire, an estimated 50,000 children simultaneously endured identical fates in this system that operated for over 4 centuries in territories spanning 3 continents. The network that destroyed him consumed young lives to feed appetites that aristocratic society preferred not to acknowledge, creating an invisible holocaust of childhood that left no monuments, no official records, and no justice for its countless victims. These same patterns operate today in institutions we trust, in systems we fund unknowingly. The faces change, the methods evolve, but the fundamental dynamic remains: the powerful consuming the vulnerable while society looks away. Modern trafficking operations use identical techniques of isolation, dependency creation, and systematic psychological destruction pioneered in Roman training houses. Contemporary institutional abuse scandals reveal the same patterns of protection for perpetrators, silence from victims, and social denial that characterized the system that destroyed children like Marcus. We remember Marcus not as a statistic in some dusty historical record, but as a human being who deserved protection, love, and the chance to live the life he chose. His story serves as a reminder that evil thrives when good people convince themselves that looking away is easier than confronting uncomfortable truths about the institutions and traditions they've been taught to respect. The shepherd boy, who once ran laughing through mountain pastures, never lived to see his 13th birthday. What survived in his body was something else entirely, a hollow shell programmed to serve appetites that no child should ever be forced to understand. His dreams of freedom, his mother's prayers, his innocent faith in human goodness, all of it was systematically destroyed by people who viewed his suffering as entertainment and his compliance as proof of their natural superiority. But in telling his story, in refusing to let his voice be silenced by time and shame, we honor not just his memory, but the memories of thousands like him, whose names we'll never know, but whose suffering demands to be acknowledged. Their ghosts still walk the corridors of power, reminding us that behind every system of privilege lies a foundation built on the bones of the powerless, and that our silence makes us complicit in whatever horrors unfold in the shadows we refuse to illuminate. If this glimpse into history's hidden darkness has left you wanting to uncover more buried truths, I've prepared another journey into the shadows of the past that you won't want to miss. Click on the video appearing on your screen now to discover another shocking chapter that history tried to erase. And if you found this exploration as compelling as I did, hit that subscribe button so we can continue peeling back the layers of history together. These forgotten voices deserve to be heard, and there are so many more stories waiting to be told.